name's Jamie, I use they them pronouns, and welcome back to my channel. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and on which I stand today. I pay my respects to all elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, as well as all First Nations people worldwide. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in 2022. So this year I read 104 books. I'll just be going through my Goodreads reading challenge, like sequentially, and talking about each book that I read. So first I read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, which I gave 4 stars. It's kind of a modern fable about a boy who has a vision that starts him on a quest to find some treasure. But he ends up finding treasure of a different kind, if you catch my drift. It was pretty good. It had a lot of really nice lines, like the writing was really good and it was pretty insightful. And then I read Red, White and Royal Blue by mcquiston, which I gave 3 stars. I gave it 4 stars when I read it, but since then I changed it down because I do not remember this book at all, to be quite honest. Now this could just be my fault because I did kind of like binge read it in one sitting, so I probably don't remember it because of that, but I could not tell you what happens at all in any capacity. But basically it's a queer teen romance novel between the first son of the United States and the Prince of England. And next up I read The Fable duology by Adrienne, which consists of Fable and Namesake. I really liked them. I gave them both 4 stars. I read her previous book Sky in the Deep, which I also really like, but it's very clear that her writing has improved since then. I think Fable, the writing was better, so that was good. So Fable is a YA fantasy involving pirates, basically. And it was really fun. It was very fast-paced, lots of action, very exciting. I read the whole duology just in one sitting, so it's pretty good. I recommend these ones. And then I read The 5th Season by Jemisin, which I gave 3 stars. To be honest, it probably warrants more like 4 stars because it is actually really good quality. It's a dystopia set in a future where the climate is like completely destroyed. Basically there's loads and loads of really severe natural disasters, and because of that certain groups of people have evolved like earth related magical powers, basically. So I thought the world building and the magic system were really well done. Like it was just very skillful, and it was also it was quite scary, like how realistic it was. Like it really does seem like definitely believable that our world could end up like that. So that was definitely well done. I just didn't like the perspectives and like the timeline. I just didn't like it. I thought it was clumsily done, which I know is a very unpopular opinion, but it just not for me, I think. But yeah, it is actually a very good book. It was just really depressing, like, which I know is the point, like that's the point. But it did make it kind of unpleasant to read, so there's that. But it is definitely very well written. Definitely the like message behind the book is very good. And then I read Piranesi by Susanna, which I gave 4 stars. It's really good. It's really good. The writing is beautiful. It does take some very unexpected turns. Like from where it began, you do not expect it to end up where it ends up, it's very interesting. Like trying to figure out what's going to happen is very interesting. It's basically about this guy who lives in his house, and on the top floor there are like clouds inside the house, and the bottom floor there's an ocean inside the house. And so the book is basically this guy writing like diary entries about his life in this house, and there's another person who he sees sometimes, and he starts like documenting their interactions, and you start to try and learn a bit about what's going on in the house. And then The Binding by Bridget, I also gave 4 stars. Now this one It's another one where you do not expect it to go where it goes. This is probably, yeah. I don't know how to really describe this without spoiling anything, but I'll do my best. Basically, it's about this guy named Emmett Farmer, who basically he gets sick and then he's too weak to work the fields anymore, so his parents sent him off to become a bookbinder's apprentice. And while he's there, he starts, you know, uncovering some hidden secrets. This book, it's split into different parts, you know, like part 1, part 2, etc. Part 1 and part 2 are like completely different. Completely, like, it takes a turn. Like the first part is very slow and kind of boring, but once you get to a certain point, then it just like, it's really good. It's really good, and I really recommend this book. It's very like emotional though. Like it fully like broke my heart, like, but in the best possible way, you know. So there's that. Then I read Good Omens by Pratchett and gaiman. It was really good. I gave it 4 stars. It's very funny. It's kind of like if Supernatural were a queer British comedy. It's probably the best explanation I can give. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and it also makes a lot of social comment, so I appreciated that. And then I read Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Now this is my first 5-star of the year. Very exciting. So this is another dystopia, but this one involves like a virus and how the resulting chaos affects like multiple different people around the globe. It's really good. The writing is beautiful. It's like kind of a cross between Erin Morgenstern and Taylor Jenkins Reid, which if you know me, you know that's very high praise because I love both those authors. It's a very good book. It's a very good book. It made me cry a lot. I stayed up until like 1 AM reading it because I could not put it down. All around, very solid, very solid. This year I also read the first 3 books of the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. So that being The Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, and The Dragon Reborn. So the first 2 I gave 4 stars, and the third one I gave 3 stars. I had previously read the first sort of 1.5 books, but that was a few years ago and I'd completely forgotten what happened. So I reread them in 2022. And they're pretty good. I do think I want to continue the series. It's just a very long series, so I don't know that I will ever finish it, but I would be interested in continuing it. It's basically just a very generic high fantasy set in kind of vaguely medieval England type of setting, with, you know, chosen one has to save the world. It's very heavily plagiarized from Lord of the Rings, to be quite honest. Like, it's not even subtle at all. Like, the Wheel of Time and the breaking of the world, which are like the fundamental concepts of the series, are both literally like direct quotes from Lord of the Rings. And like, I'm pretty sure there's something in Wheel of Time called Galadriel. Like, it's not even subtle. So that kind of does piss me off a little bit, to be honest. Especially because you see people comparing it to Tolkien, and I'm like, yeah, that's because he like stole half the shit from Tolkien. But anyway, but it's good. It's good. It is like aggressively heteronormative, but it's decent. If you like high fantasy, you'll probably like this. And then I also read We Hunt the Flame by Hafsah Faizal, which I gave 2 stars, unfortunately. It's a YA fantasy about this girl who's, you know, trying to save her land from this evil magic. And there's like a prince who is sent to assassinate her for like political reasons, you know. I really wanted to like it. It does have some pretty lines, but overall the writing was just very clumsy. It was very badly worded. Like, there was a lot of sentences where it was just so messy that I couldn't even tell what was happening, and it was very confusing. So it's unfortunate. I did want to read the second book, but I just couldn't, because the first one was not very good. So personally I wouldn't recommend them, but if you're okay with mediocre writing, then you'd probably like the plot and everything is alright, if you can find it. And then I reread The Raven Boys and The Dream Thieves, which are both from The Raven Cycle by Maggie stiefvater. So Raven Boys I gave 5 stars and Dream Thieves I gave 4 stars. So I'd already read these in 2021, but I liked them so much that I read them again this year, which tells you something. So Raven Cycle, in case you don't know, it's kind of a YA kind of paranormal fantasy. It's very queer, it's very fun, and I really like it. It has really good characters. And then I also read The Invisible Life of Addie larue by Schwab, which I gave 5 stars. This book is incredible. It's about a young woman in France in like the 1700s, I think, who makes a Faustian bargain wherein she's kind of immortal, but no one remembers her. Like, as soon as she leaves someone's sight, they forget about her. Until one day she meets someone who remembers her. It's really nice. It's very well written, and it talks about a lot of important topics. And it's very vibey, but it's also very emotive. And I really appreciate that. Next, I read The Reader by Traci, Chee, which was recommended by a friend. I gave it 1 star. I think I was just not the target audience. Like, if I'd read this when I was a child, it might have been fine, because I think it's middle grade. But yeah, it's a fantasy about, like, the power of books. Yeah, the writing was not great. The magic system was also not great. It was just very cringe in general. But again, if you're a small child, it's probably fine. But for me, hard pass. Then I reread The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, which was a 5-star read from 2021. And it's still a 5-star read in 2022. I love this book very much. It's just so magical and like enchanting, and just I love the atmosphere. I love the plot. Even though everyone says there's no plot, there actually is a plot. Don't listen to them. So yeah, I really like The Night Circus, and I'd really recommend it. If you haven't read it, you should read it, because it's impeccable. And then I read The Tempest by William Shakespeare, which I gave 3 stars. I read it twice this year, but it was for school. The first time I read it, I gave it 2 stars, but once I started studying it more, and I did a lot of research and finding a whole bunch of readings on it, I ended up actually finding a lot of things about it that I liked. So I'm actually very happy about that, because I went into it like hating it, but I came out of it actually liking it, and it actually made me want to read more Shakespeare, even though I don't have to for school anymore. So that's pretty radical, honestly. So I think I might have to get on that. Next, I also read Hag-Seed by Margaret Atwood, which I gave 3 stars. Read this twice also, and as you can probably guess, we studied it for school. It's a retelling of the Tempest set in a prison, and I thought it was a very interesting take. Provides a very unique perspective on the Tempest, and definitely adds a lot of meaning, like kind of translates it to kind of modern versions of the same issues that were underlying in Tempest. So I mean, you know, it was for school, so obviously it's not that great, but it was pretty good. It was pretty good. If you do like Shakespeare, then I would recommend you check out some of the retellings from his Hogarth project. Next, I read Hamlet by Maggie, which I gave 4 stars. I read this because I thought it was good timing, since we were studying Shakespeare at school at the time, and I think that was a good idea. It is a very good book. I cried for about a solid 100 pages continuously. It's very nice. The writing style is very lit fic, you could say. It's very good. It's very good. It's basically about, it's kind of the fictional extrapolated from real events life story of Shakespeare's son Hamlet. Then I read The Strange the Dreamer duology by Laini Taylor, which consists of Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares. This is a YA fantasy about this guy he's a librarian, and he is very captivated by stories, and he wants to travel to different places and like kind of be in where the stories were set, you know, and he gets an opportunity to go on an adventure, so he takes it. I gave the first one 4 stars and the second one 2 stars. I just think there were some choices made that I would not have made. And I think in the second book there was a lot of a focus on a specific character, and I did not like that character. Therefore, I did not like the book very much. But the world building is really cool, and there are a lot of like very like interesting ideas that I've never seen before really in a YA fantasy. So it's pretty good. I would suggest checking it out if you feel like you've read all the YA fantasy there is and it's all very similar. I suggest you read these ones. They're a little different. Then I read Honeybee by Craig Silvey, which I gave 5 stars. I love this book. I bawled my eyes out repeatedly. I do realize a lot of people don't like it because the author is cis, which I understand, because obviously it is kind of better to read own voices work by actual trans authors. But as a trans person, I thought it was a very good book. And I think it was very good, especially I think maybe because it's Australian, I don't know, but it was very relatable and it felt very authentic, I would say. So I gave it 5 stars. It's about a trans kid growing up and dealing with all the hardships that come with that, and about kind of the power of friendship and found family. Then I also reread Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas, which I read last year. I gave it 4 stars. It's a slow burn adult fake dating romance. I don't think it's as absolutely amazing as a lot of people seem to think, but it is definitely very good. It's definitely very good, as you can tell since I read it twice, so clearly I must like it. And then I read Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I gave 5 stars. It's a really cool book. I do love Taylor Jenkins Reid in general, but this one, definitely very good. It's basically about a famous family, and there's kind of 2 timelines, right? There's like their parents' timeline, so it's like it starts off like a couple decades previously, and it's like how their parents meet, and then their parents romance, and then growing up to these kids being born in their childhood right up to growing up until the present. And then there's a second timeline that's just one specific day and what these siblings are doing on this day throughout the hours leading up to them holding a house party at their house that night. Now you're told right from the beginning, like the very beginning, that this house party is going to end with the house being set on fire, right? Like, this is not a spoiler, that's like the premise of the whole book. So it's just really cool how, because you're told that right from the start, and it keeps being like brought up, even back to events that happened decades ago, you're still kind of subconsciously thinking the whole way through, like, how is this going to lead to the house being set on fire? Like, the tension, the build-up was like really good. I would say it might be slightly anticlimactic, but I don't even care because the build-up was so nice. And what I also really like about this book is just that it follows, there are quite a lot of characters, like with all the family members plus a bunch of people at the party. I thought it was really well done how it kind of gives you a bit of a glimpse into all of these different characters' lives and struggles and personalities, and it shows like kind of good and bad aspects. Like, even the characters that are only in there for like a couple pages are still really fleshed out, which is really impressive. So I think this book is definitely worth a read. Then I reread Normal People by Sally Rooney, which I read last year. I gave it 4 stars. It's pretty good. I would recommend it. I'm sure you've heard pretty much everyone else on the planet recommend it, so I won't say much more about it. I also reread Radio Silence by Elle Soseman, which last year I gave 5 stars, but this year I gave it 4 stars. It just didn't hit as hard this time, I think. But it's very good. It's about a girl named Frances who is kind of struggling with, she just tries too hard academically and like sacrifices her well-being, and it's not great. And she doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. And all her friends and everything also similarly struggling with things. It does have a lot of issues. Like, there are a lot of inconsistencies and things where I'm like, they really should have got an editor on this, to be honest. But it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's very atmospheric. I would say. That's probably its main strength, and it does make you care about the characters a lot. Next, I reread Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is a 5-star. This is probably my favourite book of all time. I read it for the first time last year. I think, yeah, it's a masterpiece, honestly. It's basically the story of a fictional rock and roll band from the 70s in America, and it's just so good. It's so good, especially the audiobook. I would really recommend you listen to the audiobook. I won't talk too much about it now because I'm going to be making future videos like dedicated to this book because it's so good. But definitely, if you've been like hesitating about reading it or not, just read it. But don't read a physical book. Listen to the audiobook for this one. Just trust me, okay? Just do it. And then I also reread the Shades of Magic trilogy by V. Schwab, which consists of A Darker Shade of Magic, A Gathering of Shadows, and A Conjuring of Light. So I gave these books 4 stars, 5 stars, and 4 stars respectively. They're really good, as you can tell since I reread them. They're fantasy, firstly, and it's kind of, there's like parallel worlds, right? There's like 4 parallel worlds that are kind of stacked up on top of each other. And in all these 4 worlds, each of them has a city called London that are kind of like next to each other in space, kind of in like separate dimensions, and certain people can use blood magic to travel between worlds, but it's very rare. And quite a few people have elemental magic, but only like a very small amount of people have blood magic. And so it's just kind of like, you know, these adventures of going between these different dimensions. Different ones of the Londons have like different amounts of magic in them, and so there's kind of a plot based on that. It's really cool, and the characters are so good. Like, I just love them so much, like all of them. I just love all of them so much, and they're really good books, so I'd recommend them. Next, I read The Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Ms. This is a Japanese translated fiction. It's basically about 7 Japanese teenagers who one day they're home from school and their mirror starts shining. They each like touch their mirror and go through, and it takes them in this portal to a castle, and at the castle they all get told like there's a hidden key which unlocks a hidden room, and like whoever finds the key and finds the room and goes in there will get 1 wish granted, like any wish. But only one person's wish can be granted, and if none of them finds it, then no one's wish will be granted. And they have like a timeline, like a certain due date. I can't really say much more than that. It's magical realism. It's really good. It just, it made me cry. It's very emotive, I would say, and it's also very imaginative. Like, it's a very fresh idea. The plot twists were pretty good, and the characterization was compelling as well. So I would really definitely recommend this book. I think I'm gonna have to reread this just thinking about this book. I also read Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, which I gave 3 stars. This again I read because of a friend. I did not really like it that much. It was just quite boring. So if you are interested in seeing like kind of the origins of genres like sci-fi, I would recommend something like this. Would probably be good, but I don't know, there are a lot more of like more recent examples that might be more enjoyable, I would suggest. Now I also reread Heartstopper, like all the webcomics, for the TV show. When it came out, I reread the comics before I watched it. So I gave all the volumes just like 3 or 4 stars. They're very good. They're very good. Very relatable. The art is really cute. I really like it. And the characters are very compelling. They are very triggering though, so read with caution. But overall, it's like wholesome messages, you know? And then I read the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert, which consists of Get a Life, Chloe Brown, Take a Hint, Danny Brown, and Act Your Age, Eve Brown. Now, Get a Life, Chloe Brown, I had already read last year, but I reread it again this year. I gave it 4 stars. It's very good. It's my second favorite in the trilogy, I would say. And then Take a Hint, Danny Brown, I read twice this year. I also gave it 4 stars. It's a fake dating romance, and it's very cute as well. And it also manages to be meaningful and emotive and like sad, you know, while maintaining a fun, cute romance plotline, so I appreciate that. But my favourite one in the trilogy is the third one, which is Act Your Age Eve Brown, which I have read 3 times this year. And it's basically about, so this is the youngest sister. Long story short, she gets a job working as a cook at a bed and breakfast. And so it's like kind of a slightly rivals to lovers between her and the like owner of the bread and breakfast. So yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I just really love the like messages. Like, it's very wholesome. It's very cute. This is my favorite adult romance trilogy. Like they're just so good. They're so good. If you like adult romance and you haven't read these ones, then I really suggest you should do that, because they're really good quality. And then I read Legacy of Ash by Matthew Ward, which I gave 4 stars. Now, this book was very confusing to begin with, because there are a lot of characters and a lot of like place names, and a lot of the names are very similar. And so I got really confused about like who was who and what was going on and who was on whose side, you know. So it was very confusing, but once I started understanding what was happening, it's a really good book. It has a lot of good plot twists and things that I've never seen before, which was very interesting. Even just the way it was like physically transcribed was really cool. It's basically just your standard high fantasy with like people being oppressed and wanting to start an uprising. And there's magic, there's politics, there's war. It's really good. It's really good. I do want to continue the trilogy. Then I read The White Book by Han. It's very short. It's a very quick read, but it's very impactful, very powerful. Made me cry. In case you haven't noticed, I do cry a lot, but for good reason, because it's very emotional, this book is, and I would really recommend it. I really would. And then A House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I gave this 4 stars. I read it twice this year. It's really good. It's very wholesome. It's a fantasy where there are people with magical powers, but they're kind of feared by the rest of society, and so they're put, like, all the children especially are put into like orphanages. And so this book is about, like, it's from the perspective of someone who doesn't have magical powers, but he works for the company that kind of runs the orphanages, and he gets assigned to this one specific orphanage to kind of investigate, to see if everything's up to code, you know. So it's kind of just about him kind of overcoming his prejudices and reevaluating his view on life. It's very wholesome, it's very cozy, and I really enjoy it, especially the audiobook. I like listening to it while I'm like baking, things like that. Really nice. I also read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, which I gave 4 stars. It's very heavy. Like, it deals with a lot of traumatic topics, so read with caution, but I thought it was really good. The writing is really nice, and it talks about a lot of important things, and it does a good job of it. So I think it's a very good book. And I also read Just Kids by Patti Smith. I gave 4 stars. I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Patti Smith, and I thought that was really good as well. It kind of added to the authenticity, so I'd recommend that. It's basically just a memoir of her life and her relationship with Robert Mapplethorpe. It's really good. It's again has some heavy emotional topics and made me cry again, but I think it was handled well, and I think it's a very insightful book, and I really would recommend it. Next, I read the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee, which is a trilogy involving Jade City, Jade War, and Jade Legacy, which I gave 4 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars respectively. I love this trilogy. It's literally so good. It's basically a fantasy, kind of an urban fantasy, based on like jade, the stone jade, but like there's a specific type of jade that gives people magical powers, but only certain people. So it's about this island where the jade originates. That's kind of run by clans, which are kind of like a cross between gangs and governments. So the trilogy kind of follows a war between 2 of the major clans on this island. It's really good. The world building is great. It's not just the island, like there are a bunch of other countries, and there's a lot of like politics and interacting with other countries and things like that. It's really good. The magic system is so cool and it's so well explained and it actually makes sense, and I really like it. And also the like myths and stuff behind it are also like really interesting, and the setting is also really cool, like because it's mostly based in like a city, and it's really cool. But the main thing that I love about this trilogy is just the characters. Like they're just written so well and I just love them so much. Like I just care about the characters so much, right, that it's actually a problem, because so many bad things happen to the characters in these books and it's so upsetting. That's why my star ratings are so low, even though these books like dominated my life for like multiple months, because it's just so upsetting whenever anything bad happens to the characters, because I care about them so much, which really just shows how well the characters are written. But like me and this author would have made different choices, I would say. But yeah, I really would recommend this trilogy. It's really good. It's very enjoyable. And then I read Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder, which I gave 4 stars. It was really intriguing, I would say. It's basically about a like mother of a very small child whose husband is pretty much always at work, like away. So it's basically just her trying to raise this child by herself, and she's kind of going a bit insane from it because she has no free time, she has no energy, she has kind of losing her identity, and she starts turning into a dog. So this also is magical realism, I would say, and it's really interesting. Honestly, I'm kind of tempted to ask my mum to read it and see what she thinks. I think that would be very interesting. I think it's a topic that needs to be talked about more, so I think it's a very important book and I think everyone should read it, to be honest. And then I read The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O, which I gave 3 stars. This is a YA romantasy based on Korean folk tales. In terms of like the setting and just the general vibes, it's very similar to Spirited Away, the Ghibli movie, which is always nice. Yeah, it was pretty good. It wasn't anything spectacular, but it was enjoyable. And then I read Hollow Empire by Sam Hawke, which I gave 4 stars. This is the sequel to City of Lies. I love these books. They're really good. They're basically a high fantasy involving poison tasters and war and siege and lots of espionage, political intrigue, things like that. They're really good, and I'd recommend them very highly. The world building is great. The plot will absolutely destroy your mind, like just whoa. Yeah, I definitely think you should read this if you like high fantasy, looking for something engaging, very addictive. I think these are something you should try. Then I also read All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata, which I gave 4 stars. I read it twice this year. This is my favorite Mariana Zapata book. It's also the first one I ever read. It's about a woman who has just gone through a very messy breakup after a very long relationship, and so to try and like recover, she decides to move back to her hometown for a bit and go on like some hikes and stuff, because she's also kind of catching up on grieving for her mother who went missing when she was 12, and she went missing on one of these hikes. So there is a lot of like sad emotional stuff going on. There's also a lot of really nice nature descriptions, and you know, it's a slow burn adult romance where a romance develops between this woman and her landlord, sort of, in the hometown. Yeah, it's a really good book. It's very just like sweet and comforting, has good nature descriptions, has some good tropes. It's very cute, and I would really recommend it. And then I read Pachinko by Lee Min-jin, which I gave 3 stars. It's an intergenerational saga about a Korean family living in Japan during the war, and it's very emotional. Again some heavy topics, but it was very educational. I think there were a lot of sort of cultural tensions that I was not aware of historically. So it was very interesting. It was very emotive. It was very meaningful. And then I read Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I gave 3 stars. This is about, basically there's this woman who goes to a party, right, and this guy at the party offers to drive her home, and from then the book splits into 2 timelines, right? One in which she says yes and lets him drive her home, and the other in which she says no and does not let him drive her home. And so then it kind of explores how this one choice could affect your trajectory in life. So it's very interesting. There's a lot about like fate and things like that, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. It's definitely not as good as some of the other stuff, but it's a very interesting premise, and I think it followed through. Then I read Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I gave 4 stars. This is a dystopia from the perspective of an AI friend, which it's kind of like parents buy these for their child, and it kind of becomes their like friend slash guardian slash pet slash iPhone. It's very cool. It's like, because it's from the perspective of the AI, and it gives a very sort of narrow focus. Like, you don't really get told what's actually happening in the world at large. You kind of just have to infer it. So it is very entertaining trying to figure out what's actually going on, you know. But yeah, it's a very good book. It's a very good book. It explores some very interesting ideas. And then I read The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary, which I gave 3 stars. Now, this is an adult romance about this guy called Leon, who is a night nurse, so he only works at night time. He rents his apartment out to Tiffy, who just works like a 9 to 5. So basically she works during the day and he's at the apartment during the day, and then at night time he's working and she's at the apartment. So they never meet or anything, but they share the same flat, right? So they kind of like, you know, leave each other like sticky notes and things like that. Yeah, so it's a romance between them. It's very cute. It's not as cute as it could have been. Like, that premise sounds so good, but I don't think it really delivered as well as it could have, which is disappointing. But it's still definitely enjoyable, and managed to also be meaningful at the same time, which is always nice. Next, I read Iron Widow by Shiran Jaeja, which I gave 5 stars. This book is incredible. It's so good. It's another dystopia. This time about these massive like mechas. They're kind of like Transformers that are piloted by like a human pilot, that like they use to fight off these like alien creatures that like attack the cities, right? But they've kind of commercialized this and made it into like sort of celebrity type of situation. Yeah, it's really good. It basically, the whole thing just examines like power dynamics, sexism, misogyny, pretty much the embodiment of female rage, I would say this book is. And it's really good. It involves polyamory as well, which is really good to see. I haven't seen very much representation of that, to be honest. And this one did a good job. And then I read Circus of Wonders by Elizabeth McNeil, which I gave 3 stars. Now, I think a lot of the reason why I didn't like this book was because I just had like preconceived ideas of what it was that turned out to be completely wrong. I don't even know where I got it from, but I thought it was a fantasy, but it's actually not fantasy at all. It's historical fiction. I kept waiting for like fantasy things to happen, and they just didn't. But that's because it's not a fantasy. That's obviously my fault. That's on me. But yeah, it's basically about this girl in like a farming village who has some sort of skin condition. So other people in the village like kind of look down on her for that. And then her dad like sells her to the circus, like the traveling circus. And so at first, obviously she's very hurt by this. Like, her dad just sold her to the circus. But then she kind of realizes that it's actually maybe not such a bad thing, because she feels like she kind of belongs with the circus people, because like they don't look down on her for her appearance. And then the plot transpires from there. Then next I read Luna and the Lie by Mariana Zapata, which I gave 3 stars. So this is about a woman who works at a car place. I think she paints the car bodies, and basically her and her boss something happened in the past where she lied about something on his behalf, and like we don't know what it is. We just know she lied about something to benefit him, and now he feels like he owes her a favor. That's kind of the premise. It was pretty good. It was slightly ridiculous, like slightly, but overall it was enjoyable. If you enjoy a classic slow burn adult romance, you'd probably enjoy this one. Next I read The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, which I gave 4 stars. I really love like the first part of this book, where it's kind of like at a military academy. There's like training montages, you know, like the magic system's really cool, the mythology is really cool, the writing is really good, the characters are compelling, like everything is so good. But then I just didn't like the turn that it takes. Like it just became too dark and disturbing for me personally. Like, it was very reminiscent of one specific story from The Paper Menagerie and Other Stories by Ken Liu, and it just it was just too much for me, I think, which is disappointing because like I was planning to read the whole trilogy, but I think after that I don't think I can handle it. Unfortunately, maybe one day. It is really good quality. So if you're okay with like kind of more dark themes, traumatic events, then it could be really good. I would recommend you check it out because it's definitely very good quality. The writing's really good, everything about it's really good. Then I read The Betrayals by Bridget Collins, which I gave 4 stars. Now, this book is really good. I just didn't really like the ending. Like, I think it could have been done a lot better. But basically, this book is also set at an academy. It's kind of a school for people, like students of the grand jeu. Now, the grand jeu is like, how do I even explain this? It's kind of it's a composition that you then perform that involves like music and art and poetry and maths and like gestures. And it's really cool. The whole concept of a grand jeu is just so cool and interesting, and like I've never seen this before, and it was very cool. It was just very cool. Yeah, it's also a dystopia, so that was pretty cool. So yeah, I would recommend this. It's pretty good. It's not, this and The Binding are not a series or anything. They're both standalones in completely separate worlds. They just have similar branding, but they're both very good. Next, I read The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata, which I gave 2 stars. This book was very disappointing for me because it's like her most popular work, I think. Like, everyone loves it, and I just did not like it at all, to be honest. Like, it got slightly cute, like right at the very end, but most of it was just really boring. I don't know, this might just be because I'm not really into like muscular men, you know? Like, and every time it just kept describing the love interest's muscles, I was just picturing like one of those anatomical diagrams of the muscular system. That's not attractive, that's just like uncomfortable. So I don't know, that's probably a me thing rather than an actual problem with the book thing. But either way, I did not like this book very much. The plot was not very good. The writing was not very good. It's just generally not very good. But that's just my opinion. You might love it. I don't know. Next, I read Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch, which I gave 4 stars, and I've read it twice this year. I love this book. It's the second book in the Gentleman Bastard sequence, the first book being Lies of Loch Lamora. I love this series so much. It's basically about a group of orphans who steal from the rich. And they do it via very ridiculously elaborate like con schemes that they somehow pull off. And it's very cool. The world building is phenomenal. The plot, astounding. And the characters, I just care about them so much. Like, they're so well written. Like Joe Tannen, I love him so much. Like, I just love everything about this series. Especially this book. It's probably my favorite one in the series, I think. So yeah, and then I read One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I gave 3 stars. This is about a woman who, her husband is kind of missing, presumed dead for like a few years, and during that time she kind of heals a bit and ends up engaged to someone new, and then she gets a call and it's her husband and he's actually not dead. So then she has to deal with, she has a husband and she has a fiance and she doesn't really know what to do. So the tagline is something along the lines of, she knows she has to follow her heart, but she's not sure what it's telling her, which pretty much sums it up, I would say. I was pretty satisfied with the ending, I would say. There were some uncomfortable moments that we had to get through, but we did get through them, and the ending was good, so I was happy about that. Then I read Must Love Silence by Lucy Bexley, which I gave 3 stars. This is a lesbian romance novel about an audiobook narrator who falls for the author of the romance book that she's narrating. It's pretty bare minimum, I would say. Like, that premise sounds really good, but I think it just wasn't written very well, to be honest. Like, it did not really pull through. Yeah, so it's not bad by any means. Like, I enjoyed it, but I don't know that I would recommend it. Then I read Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones, which I gave 5 stars. I read it twice this year, and I read it twice last year as well. I love this book. It's way better than the Ghibli movie. It just is. It's so much better. It's very wholesome, and it's very funny, and it also makes a lot of social comment, and I love the characters and I love the world building and I just love everything about it. So I would really recommend this. If you've seen the Ghibli movie and you think you know what Howl's Moving Castle is, read the book, please. I'm begging you, because it's so much better than the movie. It's so much better. Like, I love Ghibli movies, obviously, who doesn't? But the movie is good, but the book, outstanding. And then I read From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata, which I gave 3 stars. This one is another slow burn out romance based on ice skating. It's kind of rivals to lovers. It was pretty good. It was pretty cute. The plot was decent. I would say it's not life-changing by any means, but it was good. It was enjoyable. And then I also reread the first 2 books of the Lycanius trilogy, which is my all-time favorite high fantasy trilogy. So this is The Shadow of What Was Lost and An Echo of Things to Come by James Islington, which I gave 4 stars and 5 stars respectively. Again, I won't talk about these too much now because I will be doing whole dedicated videos on this trilogy because it is the love of my life. But they're high fantasy, very complicated. The magic system's great, the world building's great, the religion and like myths and stuff are also amazing. Plot is astounding. I love these books with all my heart, and more people need to read them, please. And then I read Love Stories by Trent Dalton, which I gave 4 stars. So the author like sat down on a street corner for a couple months and he interviewed a bunch of people who walked past. He asked them about their experiences of love and what they thought love is. So it's non-fiction, like some of it's been like de-identified, but it's still like true stories about various types of love, various people's experiences, plus a bit of the author's own experiences sprinkled in there. I thought it was really good. It was very authentic, it was very raw, made me cry a lot, made me laugh a lot. It was just very human and it was very good. And I think also because it's Australian, it just felt really authentic to me, and there were a lot of things that I had a personal connection to, like an event they were talking about or like a place they were talking about, something like that, which I think made it extra impactful for me personally. But I would still recommend it to anyone to read. I think it's a really good book. And then I read The Last Cuentista by Donna Barba Higuera, which I gave 4 stars. So this is a sci-fi dystopia where a bunch of humans have to like leave Earth on ships, and it follows a girl who wants to be a storyteller, which is what Cuentista means. The sci-fi elements of it are really interesting, but overall the focus is mostly on like humanity and the power of stories and things like that. So I think this is a very good book. And next I read Forever Interrupted, which is Taylor Jenkins Reid's debut novel. I gave it 2 stars. I think also partially this could have been the audiobook narrator was not that great. Definitely nowhere near as good as Julia Whelan. This book is about a couple who get married within like 2 months of having met each other. And then, like, the main character is craving a type of cereal, right, which is called Fruity Pebbles. So then her husband goes to the shops on his bicycle to buy some Fruity Pebbles, and he gets in like a car accident and dies. So then it's about the main character trying to deal with her grief over her very, very newlywed husband, and then also having to try and interact with his family who she's never met before. And every time they talked about Fruity Pebbles, it made it more and more difficult to take this book seriously. Maybe it's just because I'm Australian. I have never heard of Fruity Pebbles before, but it's just the stupidest cereal name. And the fact that it kept trying to make me sad and then talking about Fruity Pebbles, I was like, that's not gonna work. Like, how is that supposed to, how can I be sad about Fruity Pebbles? Like, yeah. So it's kind of ridiculous, to be honest, this book. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's not bad. It did raise some interesting points, and I think it managed to be quite meaningful in its own way. But definitely, you can skip it and you won't miss anything. So next, I read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which I gave 5 stars. This is a sci-fi. I can't really tell you what it's about because the main character starts off having amnesia from like the cryo whatever from the spaceship, so he also does not know what's happening. So you're not supposed to know what's happening, so I can't really tell you anything without it being a spoiler. But it's really good. It's really good. Probably definitely one of the best sci-fis I've ever read, and I would absolutely recommend it. The science was explained well enough that if you didn't know what they were talking about, it explained it well enough that you could understand. But if you did already know what they were talking about, it wasn't explained too much. Like, it wasn't intrusive at all. So I thought that was really well done. And it was very smooth. Like, it wasn't info dumping. It was like smartly like woven through the text. So I thought that was well done. That was well done. Yeah, it was funny. It was sad. It was scary. It was written really well. The characters were very realistic and believable, and the plot was really cool, and the world building was really cool. Everything about it was really good, and I really liked it. I'd recommend. Next, I read A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy Eileen, which I gave 4 stars. This is a YA fantasy with a magic system based on tea, brewing tea. So basically there's this girl, the main character, who her sister is sick and she can't heal her. Like, she's tried everything but it hasn't worked. And so she travels to the capital city and she enters into this tea brewing competition because she thinks if she wins, then as her reward she's gonna ask for like the royal physician to go and heal her sister. But while she's in the capital, she gets kind of caught up in some intrigue plots. So yeah, it's a really good book. The world building is really cool. It's very cozy. There's so many food descriptions because they'll often eat food with the tea, and it made me so hungry. Like, the descriptions are really nice. So yes, I really recommend this book. It also has a slightly cliffhanger ending. I really want to read the second book, which is called A Venom Dark and Sweet. So I'm going to have to get onto that, I think, because it's a very good book. Next, I read Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas, which I gave 3 stars. I read this last year as well. I'm not going to say anything about this, to be quite honest. If you know, you know. It's not very good quality at all, but it is a good time. That's all I'll say. And then next I read The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch, which I gave 4 stars. I also read this twice this year. Speaking of cliffhanger endings, this is one of the worst ones I've ever seen. Despite the ending, we did get some very satisfying plot points. So I really like this book. And now I read Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney, which I gave 5 stars. I would have to say I think this is my favorite book from this year. I really think it is. It's incredible. Like, I can't even describe to you how good it is. Like, it's just so good. Like I said, I've read Normal People twice, but Normal People does not even compare to this book at all. I love it. It's really good. I think it genuinely, like, fundamentally changed me as a person, which is like whack, but I genuinely think it did. Basically, it follows 4 main characters: Alice, Eileen, Felix, and Simon, and just their like struggles in life, with themselves, with their relationships with other people, and just it's just so good. Like, it's so good, and it's just wow. Like, the writing is beautiful. Everything about it is just gorgeous. Like, I just read this book, please, I'm begging you. Next, I read Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, which I gave 4 stars. Now, this book is a YA fantasy. It's a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. Now, something which I actually never realized was that Rumpelstiltskin, I mean, obviously there was like the original folktale, but the Brothers Grimm version, they actually changed it to make it anti-Semitic, because of course a lot of Jewish people were moneylenders, and so they changed it to kind of demonize Jewish moneylenders in the form of Rumpelstiltskin. And Naomi Novik, the author, is Jewish, right? So she wrote this retelling, which is kind of like a pro-Jewish version of Rumpelstiltskin. So the main character is Jewish, and her father is a moneylender, but he's really bad at it because he never wants to collect money from anyone, even though they owe him. And so her family is like really poor and struggling. And one day she decides like she's had enough, and she takes over her father's money lending business. And she gets really good at it. And she gets so good at it to the point where the Stark, which are kind of ice fae, they come and want her to change their silver into gold. Hence the title, Spinning Silver. Rumpelstiltskin. It's really good. The world building's good. The characterization is good. The whole message obviously is very important. So yeah, I recommend this book. It's very good, very enjoyable. So next we have A Taste of Gold and Iron by Alexandra Rowland, which I gave 4 stars. This is a fantasy romance between a prince and his bodyguard. Now, I'd never heard of this before, but it was available on my audiobook app that I use, and so I looked it up on Goodreads, and I saw someone listing like all the tropes that were in it, and a lot of them are really good, and saying that the author writes really good Mordau's Shur fanfiction. So hearing that, I was like, I'm sold. Sign me up. Obviously, it's gonna be great. And I was right. It's a really good book. It's really good. I think the world building is good and the plot is good and the magic system and everything is good, but I think the real strength of this book is that it didn't try to overreach. Like, it just did exactly what it had to do to fulfill its purpose and no more. And I think that's actually its strength for sure. Because like, yeah, the world building's good, but it's not complicated. It's not overly complicated. It doesn't detract from the book's actual like selling point, which is the romance. So I think it was very like cleverly handled in that way. And the romance itself is definitely very cute, so I'd recommend this book. Next, I read Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, which I gave 3 stars. This is a YA fantasy based on African culture, and it's kind of just generic YA fantasy. There's like a quest, chosen one, certain items they have to get in order to bring magic back and save the land, save their people, you know. It's very good. The message of this book, I think, is definitely very important, and I thought it was conveyed very effectively. I'm not sure that I will continue the series, to be honest, but I think it's definitely a good one. It definitely is. So if you like YA fantasy, then I think you should check this one out, because it has some very fresh concepts that I haven't seen before. Next, I read The Kiss Quotient, The Bride Test, and The Heart Principle by Helen Huang, which I gave 4 stars to all 3 books. I read these because I'd heard about The Heart Principle and I thought it sounded really good and I wanted to read that one, but it's the 3rd one, so I thought I should probably read the first 2 first, you know, it would make sense. Technically you don't have to though, but I thought I probably should. So I read all 3 of them, and they're all really good. They're all adult romance novels, and they all have at least one autistic main character, which I also really appreciated. I thought it was handled very well. Yeah, look, these 3 books are very similar to each other, like very similar. Like ridiculously similar, but I like them, so it just means I get 3 books I like. So they're pretty good, and it's actually own voices as well, which is always nice. So yeah, I'd recommend these if you're looking for some adult romance. These are a good one. Next, I read Phosphorescence on Awe, Wonder, and the Things That Sustain You When the World Goes Dark by Julia Baird, which I gave 3 stars. It's not life-changing by any means, but it was very good. It made me laugh, it made me cry. It's a non-fiction kind of stream of consciousness, to be honest, about this woman's experiences with like struggling with various things in her life and how nature can be kind of a refuge from that. Pretty much did exactly what I thought it would do and no more. And that's okay, there's a time and place for that, for sure. Next, I read A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martin, which I gave 4 stars. This is a sci-fi about colonization, but transferred to the context of space. It's a really good book. It's really good. I'm gonna read the sequel for sure. Yeah, it's very meaningful. I cried a lot. It broke my heart, but I also laughed. There are a lot of funny moments too. And yeah, it's very human and it's very good quality. It's very well written. The sci-fi aspects of it are very interesting. Like a lot of them I've never seen before. So it's really cool. I would definitely recommend this book. The plot, also really good, so I suggest you read this. It's a duology. So next, I read Sister Song by Lucy Holland, which I gave 4 stars. So this is a fantasy set in kind of ancient Britain, like just post fall of Rome Britain, and basically their land used to have magic, but since people have kind of started abandoning their old religion, as Christianity takes over, their magic has like weakened. And so we follow 3 siblings who they're like kind of royal as they try and navigate their own personal struggles, but also, you know, trying to get the magic back for their kingdom. And they're also like, you know, there's threats of invasion and things like that. So it's really good. It's very well done. The world building is really good. The characterization is really good as well. The plot twists. And the main thing I like about this book is one of the 3 main characters is trans, right? I don't think that's a spoiler because it's very apparent from very early on. And I just thought it was done very authentically. Like, it felt very accurate to my own experiences, at least. It just made me feel seen in the way that not many things can do, to be honest. So I thought that was very impressive. Next, I read Boyfriend Material and Husband Material by Alexis Hall, which is a duology. I gave the first one 3 stars and the second one 2 stars. I just really didn't like the ending of the second one. They're just like a very generic gay romance duology, and they were enjoyable. They did manage to talk about a lot of important topics, which I really appreciated, and they were pretty funny as well. They had a good sense of humor, and they were pretty good. The characters were pretty good. I don't think they were as good as they could have been. Like, they could have been better, but they were still definitely very good. Except for the ending of the second book, which I really did not like. And next, I read Uprooted by Naomi Novik. I read it twice this year. I gave it 4 stars. It's really good. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling about, there's this evil forest basically that like hurts people. And so basically there's this valley which has a forest in it. It's like an evil forest. And so in order to not be like all destroyed by the forest, people living in this valley, every 10 years they send a girl to this lord called the Dragon, who lives in a tower, and he's a wizard. And every 10 years they send him a girl to like work for him, and in return he keeps them safe from the forest. And so our main character obviously gets sent to the tower and starts to realize that not everything she thought she knew about the dragon is actually true. And neither is everything she thought she knew about the forest, as it turns out. So yeah, it's a really good book. As you can tell since I read it twice, it's really addicting, like very intoxicating. The romance is good, the world building is good, the plot's good, the magic system is really cool. The main character is very capable, and it's really nice. It's just a really nice book. Next, I read Fortuna Sworn and Restless Slumber, which are the first 2 books in the Fortuna Sworn series by KJ Sutton. I gave both of them 4 stars. This is basically a dark adult fantasy involving fae, very heavy on the fae. Basically, the main character, who is a nightmare, which is a type of fae that they can like see and kind of manipulate other people's fear, she ends up kind of stumbling into developing a connection with the Unseelie Court, and that's her trying to navigate that basically. So yeah, they're really good. They're very addictive, honestly. Very fast paced, lots going on, lots of action, and very enjoyable. I think if you like Holly Black or Sarah J Maas, I think you would like these books. I talked a bit more about these in my previous video, which I'll link for you in the card, so you can go check that out if you're interested. And lastly, I read Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune, which I gave 4 stars. Like I said, I really liked House in the Cerulean Sea, so I finally got around to reading this one as well. It's about a lawyer who dies and gets taken by a Grim Reaper to this kind of tea shop, where it's a place that like spirits go to try and let go of their like regrets and stuff so they can move on to the afterlife. But during his stay there, he kind of starts to, via his relationships with the Grim Reapers and the ferrymen and like the people at the tea shop, he starts to challenge his view of life. Yeah, again, very wholesome, very cozy, very cute, and I appreciate it. If you want to go have a look at my reading challenge for yourself, you can go follow me on Goodreads. Otherwise, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram if you'd like. I hope you're having a wonderful day and or night, and I'll see you next week with another video. Bye!